Hey sightseers, Sightseeing Sally here. Making our way back from Eagle River, we came across what would be considered a forgotten town up here in northern Wisconsin known as Argon. Now Argon, if you didn't know, hasn't always had the name of Argon. In fact, it's had two other names in its history that I know of. North Crandon and Van Ziel. Van Ziel being the original name, it was named after Abraham Van Ziel, the man who platted the town. Later, it was named North Crandon. And then, sometime in the 1920s, the name was changed to Argon, basically after the French forest of Argon. From what I understand, it was meant to commemorate World War I veterans, as one of the locals had lost a son there in the French forest of Argon. Apparently, having the name North Crandon was causing too much confusion with the mail being routed, because Crandon is just a few miles away from Argon, and also because an individual lost his son during World War I. They just decided to make the name change. As you can see, they haven't forgotten about their founding father, Abraham Van Ziel, as they do have an avenue named for him. They also haven't forgotten those who served in World War II and Korea, as they have this memorial here set up. It is quite an extensive list of names, indicating that this town was once a lot bigger than what you see here today. It's kind of interesting. They have what appears to be a memorial stone for each individual who I believe passed away during the war, and indicating the location of where they died. This one is for Corporal James A. Deaton, who died in Germany on March 24th, 1945. Over here, this one is in tribute of Corporal Forrest F. Shorey, who lost his life in Italy October 1st of 1944. And it just continues on down the line on both sides. If you're wondering where all the action happens on a Friday or Saturday night, it's going to be in one of two places here in Argon. It's either going to be at Kathy's Inn, which you can see is a happening place at noon on a Monday, or Ed's. However, I just noticed something. Actually, I just noticed two things. The first one being this sign here, which means if you have a little bit too much fun over at Ed's or Kathy's, you don't want to leave your vehicle parked out in front, because apparently they'll tow you. And it'll be at your own expense. I've had that happen to me once in my life, not because I left it parked overnight at some sort of adult drinking establishment. No, rather, I parked in a grocery store parking lot just so I could go to the beach, and the town where this beach was located didn't have any public parking, or should I say the public parking was very limited, and I decided to take the risk by parking in this parking lot for a grocery store, and guess what? Well, I got nabbed. But that's a story that I guess is better left in the past, because there's more to it, but I'll just leave you with that. The other sign I noticed is that there is a for sale sign here at Ed's, which means if you have dreams of serving up roasted chicken at an adult drinking establishment up here in the middle of nowhere, Wisconsin, you may have found your spot. Oh, look at that. I just noticed something else here on the side of the building. Now that is a huge rifle, shotgun, replica, some sort of self-protective device. Although, being on the side of the building and the fact that it is only a replica, I'm not sure how much protection you're going to get using it unless you swing it around like a broken off pool stick. Not that I know anything about doing that sort of thing. I'm just saying. Getting back to Argon, you can see they still have their old Farmers Merchant State Bank standing here on the corner of Main and Railroad. This here being Railroad, and of course this being Main Street. There's not many businesses left on Main Street. Again, there's Ed's, Kathy's Inn. They've got their fire department right here, and then the old bank. If we take a little bit of a walk-see down Railroad, you'll notice that there is another old brick building over here next door to the old bank building. I'm not sure what that used to be. I tried to do a little research online before coming out here today, but I don't recall seeing anything that stated specifically what this building used to be. If anybody knows, feel free to let me know in the comments section. Here's a view straight on, just so you can get a better look at the building itself. You'll notice that the town is built next to some railroad tracks. However, based upon the overgrowth, particularly in this direction, you can see that these tracks are now defunct. From what I had seen online, there used to be an old train depot that was still standing, probably some years back. I don't know what happened to it. I thought maybe this building here might have been a part of it, but I'm thinking that may not be the case because it doesn't seem to match up with the historical picture I had seen online. As you can see, we're now up in the cemetery, or the Catholic cemetery, that some of the locals of Argon have been laid to rest. Looking at the headstones, some of them date back to the early 1900s, while others are a bit more recent. This one has an interesting name on it, Bobo, which strangely reminds me of my grandfather, even though that wasn't his name. My sister, when she was really little, for quite a long time, couldn't say grandpa, so she called him Bobo. I don't know how she came up with it, but that's what she called my grandpa. And I haven't heard that in so long, so many years. Obviously, no connection. I don't think I have any family connections up here in Argon. At least none that I'm aware of. I did notice a few headstones with some Polish sounding last names, like Jeski's here, and the Zaborowskis over here, and the Grabowskis over there, leading me to believe that Argon at one time was settled, or at least partly settled, by those of Polish descent. Interestingly enough, They still have a post office here for the residents of Argon, with an actual, honest-to-goodness mailbox and outdoor ashtray next to the building. For those of you looking for the town of Argon, you'll notice it's off of a scenic byway known as Highway 32 and 55 North, although 55 North takes a right up there. Another point of interest that you don't see much of these days is the building for the local telephone company, the Crandon Telephone Company, Argon Exchange, which I believe may have been bought out by Frontier at some point. But don't quote me on that. I'm just going off the fact that there is a Frontier sign or decal here on the side of the building. There is an active community church here in Argon. Although, if you walk down the block past these few buildings, you'll notice on this opposite corner, there was an old church here as well. What church it was, I don't know. You can see that there is still some of the stained glass intact in that window there, although a couple of the panes appear to be missing. And whatever the church bell or wherever the church bell is now, I can't speak to that either. I must confess, this is not my first time stopping in Argon. In fact, if you go back to earlier Sightseeing Sally videos, you might catch a glimpse of the old bank. And if we go farther back in my history, we're talking pre-YouTube. In fact, we're talking just out of high school. So in my late teens, early 20s, I used to spend a considerable amount of time up in this area exploring and hanging out and doing things kids of that age used to do, aka party. Do kids still do that these days? I don't know, but I'm not saying anything more about that. Mum's the word. Moving on, we can see that they've got this really cute little, I don't know if that's supposed to be a miniature dollhouse or a birdhouse, because if you look over here, it looks like a kid's playhouse right there with an old bicycle just hanging out here in this yard. As you can probably tell, not a whole lot happening today in Argon. I imagine the residents probably like it that way. You know, quiet, peaceful, small town living at its best. Hey, look, somebody set up a miniature town within Argon. This building here, I guess, is the grocery store of this miniature town. There's also a miniature church here in the woods. See? And if you look back in the trees, there's some railroad signs in there. There it is. There's also another building right there. It's kind of reddish. I wonder what that's all about. I had, interestingly enough, read online that within the town of Argon there is also this small unincorporated community, but right now it escapes me the name of that unincorporated town or unincorporated community. If I remember, I'll pop it up on the screen here. What's kind of cool, getting back to this property here with the miniature village set up, They've got right here an eagle and then a soldier kneeling. And then if we look down along this fence line here, you'll notice that at the very end, they have the depot, and I know it's really hard to see. You're likely not going to see it, but there is a train sitting, waiting inside the depot for passengers. That's so intriguing. I wonder what the story is about that. It wasn't something I was expecting to find here in Argon. Yet, there it is, a miniature village waiting to be explored. By the way, that miniature village is located at the corner of Main and Bailey Avenue. Main Street, of course, being where we started out. Here is a view of Main Street looking out towards where the railroad line runs through. I forgot to mention earlier that the railroad that ran through here it was a line running from Minneapolis all the way to Sault Ste. Marie. And speaking of forgotten things, I almost forgot. I have a couple of quick shout outs I want to give. First, I'd like to give a quick shout out of thanks to Jack Picardi. Jack, if you didn't know, spends a lot of time posting different memes and things that he creates for Sightseeing Sally in our private group on Facebook. Jack also recently tipped our tip jar. So for those two things, I'd like to give Jack a special extra shout out of thanks, because the group stuff that he does is solely on his own, nothing that we demand, and it's just really appreciated that he does that, because without Jack's posts to that group, I'm pretty sure that would be, the group is staying alive because of Jack. Next, I'd like to give a quick shout out of thanks to Richard from Arkansas for also tipping our tip jar. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it, especially now because views on YouTube have been, which has really cut into my ability to earn any kind of from the ads, because when there's no views, there's no ads. And well, again, it is greatly appreciated. You guys rock. And with that, I'd like to bring this episode of Sightseeing Sally close. Until next time.